Uh, so this is our first blockchain art meeting with the blockchain artist, Eric Barry Drayson, hosting. And we have guest Steve Henley today.
And MC Jim Whitescarver.
We don't, we're just deciding what to do. We created a channel in the Colab called Blockchain Art. And Eric's been looking around, getting his feet wet, seeing what's going on in various things. We're looking at potential applications for ArtChain, HoloChain, third generation blockchain technology applied to digital assets, including art. And take it away, Eric.
Yeah. Well, so Steve, I mean, what aspect, I mean, there's a lot going on in this space. Is there anything that you're specifically interested in?
No, I'm pretty ignorant to the entire topic of blockchain and art. So I'd be interested in knowing what are the various different aspects that are out there, and then maybe after that discussion, there's a particular one that we as a group find a little bit more interesting than others, and we can dive a little deeper. But from that 10,000 foot view, I'm very just curious of what in general what is blockchain art.
All right. Well, luckily for you, you've come to the right place. There is, depending on who you talk to, you're going to get a different answer to this question, obviously. I am coming from several different perspectives on this, having familiarity with, I guess, what you can consider multiple perspectives on this kind of multidimensional thing that we're calling art on the blockchain. Not all of it I would necessarily agree is art on the blockchain, but basically what you have is, well, I think on a baseline level, you have art, right? What is art? Now that's like a very loose and open subject in and of itself. Like when you really get into it, the idea of what art is or could be is an incredibly broad lateral territory. But it's also a very interesting place to prototype ideas, right? So when we talk about art, de facto art in the 20th century stopped being painting and sculpture in the 50s. Object. Oh, hey there.
Hey, Gary.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Gary.
We're learning about blockchain art today with our guest, Eric Barry Drayson.
Hey, Gary.
Sounds interesting. I've been fooling around with digital graphics myself, so this sounds interesting.
Ah, cool. Yeah, I saw you on one of the previous calls. I'm assuming you're involved with Colab and Dig Live.
Yes, both of those, and also ArtChain.
ArtChain, cool.
Are you Dig Life as well?
I'm a recent addition to both Dig Life and Colab. I met Jim in New York 2 or 3 weeks ago at NYU.
Yes.
And found just the things that he was working on and talking about very interesting. And so I've sort of been lurking around these communities for the last week or two, trying to figure out just like what's going on and like trying to just digest the intense amount of information. I'm failing miserably, but trying to just understand where you guys are at and what you're doing, because a lot of what's happening here really resonates with me.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out how I can contribute and plug in to what you guys are doing.
Well, there's certainly places for everybody here. But you're right. It's overwhelming. And I've been here for 2 years, and I just can't imagine, what it would be like coming in new. But it's great to have you here, and I'm excited to hear about your work.
Well, yeah. I mean, basically, I've been involved with the blockchain space as it specifically relates to art since, I guess, the end of 2015, early 2016. I launched a project called Moving Pictures Gallery, which kind of prefigured the whole rare art movement that happened about 2 years later. So you've heard of crypto kitties and stuff like that. What we were sort of theorizing at that time was before ERC 721 token, like non-fungible tokens existed. But what's sort of interesting is, I guess there's several different conversations here, right? Is there anything that you're specifically interested in, Gary, that you want to talk about as far as the relationship to blockchain and art? Because like I feel like there's a few different sort of baseline things that we could be talking about that sort of helps the whole thing congeal.
Well, just to tell you where my interests are, I studied mathematics and computer science and did both professionally for a while, and I'm retired now. I'm an educator. I'm really into open learning and co-learning sessions. I'm helping with the McRobot project that Jim has been working on. I'm sure you've heard about that. And I'm kind of all over the map. I'm not really an expert at anything, and I tend to dabble at a lot of things. So, if that tells you anything.
Yes, I myself can be maybe in my finer moments I'm considered a dilettante, a bit of a dilettante myself. So
sure, that's what my wife calls me quite often.
Yeah, so yeah, it's an interesting thing because my background is in media art and performance, so designing interactive audiovisual installations and performances. And that's actually directly what brought me into this conversation, and I can talk a little bit more about that. But in my initial encounters with the blockchain space, it was kind of like when I was a kid, and I discovered digital art, and it was like, oh, well, I like drawing, and I like playing music, and I like animating, and oh wait, I can combine all these things on a computer, right? With the blockchain, all of a sudden, it's like all these sort of separate areas of study that were seemed atomized all of a sudden converge, and now I'm learning about logistics, and I'm learning about finance, and I'm learning about asset management, and I'm learning about legal contracts, and I'm like learning about all this stuff as it relates to culture, and it's like crazy, and I'm not an expert in any of these things, and yet we have to develop some type of fluidity with these ideas in order to begin to have this conversation about what could this be, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So you say you got in. It sounds like you got interested in digital art. Did you have you? At what level? Okay, here's my question. What kind of tools do you like to use to create digital art?
I use what are called real-time tools. Modular programming environments, data flows type programming environments.
Okay.
To create basically like synthesizers, like sound and visual synthesizers. And so I perform them as an instrument, and I organize big festivals and things in New York City. I was an arts organizer. And basically what happened was I started working with an older friend of mine, Benton Bainbridge, on this blockchain project where he had been in dialogue with the consensus people for several years, sort of theorizing on this concept of the distributed object. But the ideas were just like a mess. It was all over the place. So I basically worked with him super intensely for 6 months, hammering these things down so we could launch this project whereby we could start editioning digital art as singular editions, right? So in order for that to happen, there's a confluence of things that need to sort of come together, right? Both a technological, a legal and conceptual stack needs to be created and sort of fit in. So we were talking about California legal intellectual property law, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about cryptographic, hashing, right? Distributed storage, provenance contracts, self-executing smart contracts, right? Like all these things need to sort of work together in a way. And through that confluence, you have something called a distributed object, right? Now, as this relates to art specifically, art is a really interesting sort of area to prototype a lot of different types of ideas. Like I'm a graduate student at the University of Buffalo, and they have a bio art lab here, right? So there are biologists making art with biology, and art has become this very interdisciplinary kind of space where it's like I'm an academic researcher and I'm involved in cultural production, but like I'm doing this stuff with economics. And the idea of what art is, it started to morph around the middle of the 20th century, even before that really. But I like to sort of frame the conversation around Solowitz. He was like a famous graphic artist who started issuing, he was what I would consider to be the first algorithmic artist.
Okay. Now this is this is an area of interest that I have. Okay.
So he was the first person to create sets of instructions for his assistants to carry out the work. Therefore, the work actually wasn't the painting that the assistants would make at the collector's home. It was the contract stating the instructions for how to create that work, right? So what you have, and then around that same time, you start having people moving into things like performance art and digital electronic art started becoming available to us starting in the mid-60s. And so how do you begin to sell art? Like, how is this art? It's not a painting. It's not a sculpture. This isn't a thing that I can own. But what started happening was the legal system came up to create this new form of property whereby the idea of what the art was stipulated in the contract and the certificate of authenticity. And that's how art is sold. Furthermore, unlike other forms of property ownership, if I, as an artist, let's say I sell you a piece of mine and then I become more famous and you try to flip it at auction at Sotheby's, if I show up to that auction and disavow that work is now not worth anything. This is a legally protected right that artists have over their work while they're alive. So it's like a really interesting place because this doesn't function the same way. And the art market in and of itself doesn't function like other markets. It's not a free market. It's totally artificially constructed by a set of extremely elite collectors and institutions and museums, which is fed by this vast grassroots network of local cultural organizations, right? So what gives a work value ultimately is its place in what's called the canon, right? People that have historicized the work, they've written about the work, the work is taught in schools. This is kind of, it's part of a broader cultural dialogue that exists sort of in like different cities, museums, at the university level, and so people call that elitist. As someone, if you're not really plugged into that whole thing, but on this whole other level, that represents 10% of the actual art world itself. Like if you go to any town across the United States, you're going to find grassroots communities that are artist spaces, that are having all sorts of crazy stuff that are catering to these communities, So what I'm trying to say is how we construct value in art is different than other types of commodities or collectibles where it's very much one-to-one. this is a thing, it has value, I sell you a thing, you own the thing, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes, and you know, this is sort of synchronistic because I've been interested in something called ERTP, Electronic Rights Transfer Protocol. Have you run into that?
No. Spell that again. ERTP?
Yeah, ERTP, Electronic Rights Transfer Protocol. Mark S. Miller came up with this, and we have one of the world's leading experts here available to us, Dan Conlon.
Dan Conway?
Conlon. Am I saying it right, Jim?
Dan Conley on
Conlon.
our
Conlon.
Colab friend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he goes by DC Casey in the channels, but he is an expert on electronic rights transfer protocol at the code level, and our intention is to implement that in our chain. But you know, I'm not sure where Dan stands with our chain anymore. But I'll let Dan talk about that.
Oh, we should invite him next week. I'd love to meet him.
Yeah, this may not be a good time of the day for him. He has a 9 to 5 that he usually keeps him away from these particular meetings. He has a Saturday morning session though that he calls his office hours that I can highly recommend. But this ERTP is something that sounds like it's sort of what is needed here. Jim, what do you think about that?
Yeah, what the electronic rights is about is sort of like the layer above the object capability model, where in computer science, if I have a capability, you know, the object capability model is different from access control, where we have an object and we have a list of people with different permissions to access that object. Okay, in the object capability model, I have certain capabilities, and I can delegate those capabilities by I own the capabilities.
So this is like almost like a browser. Okay, this is like, all right, so when we were like sort of talking about, we called it something different, but this is basically the browser plugin that lets the owner of a file that's maybe located in distributed storage manage who and how people can access that file, right? And also maybe mediates micropayments for access to that file or things like that. Is that what we're describing?
Yeah, that's what it's used for. But the object capability model is just a very basic way of handling permissions. And yes, those are the kind of permissions you would.
This protocol is something on top of the object capabilities model that's necessary to transfer rights. And Marcus Miller has gone into this very deeply. This is really low-level stuff. I mean, it leads to all these wonderful applications, but this is something that's got to be adopted at the technical level.
Right.
Well, and that's really interesting to me because, I mean, basically what I've been working on is essentially one level below that. Like, what is the distributed object itself, right? And then the second thing is like, how do we manage rights? And like, I haven't even started getting into that aspect of it because I just want to like understand what the baseline level is.
Okay.
How can we reimagine what property is in the first place? And then after we've done that, come up with alternative strategies and schemes for mediating.
Yes, but the problem of artists retaining the ability to disavow a work during their lifetime is something that can be handled so easily with this ERTP.
Is this token based? It's not token based?
It's right at the level. I mean, it's actually outside of the token, but it certainly uses cryptography to be implemented. Jim, can you talk about what the connection between cryptography or tokens and ERTP is?
You have these, trusted domains that communicate securely. So it uses cryptography for secure communications between the trusted domains, which, what does it call them, pods or VATs? VATs,
yeah.
And, but within the, an object capability is an unforgeable thing that you have that you can share, but and then you build the rights on top of that. And this is where you end up with the more complex agreements. How it's handled. Okay, but the rights, it's very primitive computational model. Anything you want to build, you would build on top of the object's rights framework. You wouldn't build anything below it. And maybe we could find a good example of it. There's languages that support it, or that enforce it. A dialect of JavaScript, even that they use that enforces or can enforce this rights.
So you would basically, what you're saying is we would use this language to construct a self-executing smart contract, not Rolang. Or is Rolang going to be able to be used?
Right, yeah, Rolang will definitely be able to implement ERTP.
Right.
Greg is a big fan of that as well.
I'm thinking about this. This is really interesting because, one of my interests. This is jumping ahead a little bit, but basically, my attitude towards what art on the blockchain is or could be at this point involves using something like ERTP as the site of the art itself. So what I'm not interested in is taking a pre-existing digital asset and selling it necessarily via some type of smart contract tokenized marketplace. The byproduct of that will be possible, right? That's already basically possible. But using the actual platform itself as the work. Because if we're operating from the assumption that art is the contract, then that opens up this whole other set of possibilities for what art could be as a kind of relational space. Which that may be a little esoteric if you're not familiar with relational art or participatory. There's a whole histories of people that have been doing this since the 70s, making art as community spaces, art as sets of instructions that modify social spaces in different ways. There's art as there were some artists that have used legal contracts to enforce strange parameters for how and why the work can be collected.
I think you mentioned that earlier, and that further elaboration was kind of what I needed to get a better understanding of this reimagination of what art is. I think so many people think of art in a traditional sense of something visual or through audio, but this is a reimagination of art. This is very interesting.
Yeah, I'm a little. I apologize. I'm coming from sort of this very academic art thing, so there's probably a lot of I'm sort of starting from a level 11. You know what I mean? When it's we need to kind of walk through a little bit of how the hell do you get there? It's not these ideas aren't coming out of nowhere. There's a big long history of people that have sort of been pushing these boundaries for a long time. Mm-hmm. I am just sort of pushing them into the blockchain space. Mm-hmm. At least that's how I see it. I don't see anything that I'm doing being vastly different or revolutionary, or it may be, but like not. It's only because it's like kind of like if you're listening to jazz music, right? Well, like, all right, you got Count Basie playing the blues, and then all of a sudden you got like, I don't know, John Coltrane. Like, how do you get from like Count Basie to John Coltrane? You know, it's like there's some steps there, right? You got to go through Charlie Parker, you know, and so you have these kind of like levels of abstraction where you have sort of songs that are identifiable with like chord progressions that you understand, and then you have like one level of abstraction on top of that, and then you have an abstraction of the abstraction, you know, which just makes it like totally unintelligible if you haven't heard Count Basie. How are you going to understand John? You know, it's like, unless you're like, I don't know, whatever, like a weirdo or something, which I was, but I said maybe it's a poor analogy, but
no, this is all very helpful. Like, you know, it's my exposure to art. You know, I play the guitar, so you know I'm a Beatles fan, and you know that's you know I'm one of those who think of art as a traditional sense, but I appreciate, you know, the people who push the boundaries of what art is. Here in Tampa Bay area, we have the Salvador Dali Museum.
Oh, cool.
And so, you know, when you walk through the Salvador Dali Museum, you know, it's a lot of it is abstract art. And at the time, Salvador Dali, he was pushing the boundary of what art was. So, you know, it becomes very, very interesting when that happens.
Yeah. So, all right. So like on a baseline level, we have digital art, right? What the hell is digital art? And who the fuck makes digital art? This is just like, you know, why would you do this? You can't sell it, right? Like what would you do? But like there have been people since the 70s that have been working in this medium, and it's only in the last like 5 years that it's really started to hit mainstream in the art world. Like people, like you see galleries, the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York just had the last 2 years had big digital art showcases showing artists from the 70s to the present. And so I was able to actually take my parents to the Whitney in January and be like, all right, guys, like this is what this is. This is what I do, right? But it's kind of hard to explain otherwise. Like, how does this relate to painting, you know? But it does. It definitely does.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you know the musician, artist, performer Tipper?
Tipper?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
Well, he's a digital artist, and I was just wondering if that was if you had ever done anything like he does. But I'm a big fan of his, and I haven't listened to much of his stuff lately. But you know, I'll put a link in the chat channel on Discord to one of his pieces that I like, and see what you think of it. It's real psychedelic, you know, but I like it.
Cool.
Okay.
But this is helpful, Eric, as you walk us through these different levels. So we're at level 1, which is digital art. So take us through these the different levels.
Yeah. So you have digital art, right? And I think fundamentally you have something which is replicable, right? There's no scarcity here. And so the initial idea, I mean, and you guys, I'm sure were a part of these like open source software development communities, right? Like probably before I was even around. You know, we live in these sort of abundance economies, and we're trying to imagine what living in sort of these gift economy, abundance economies could be, because software is free, and we have the Free Software Foundation. And why do we need to put gatekeepers and charge people for this resource? And so culture became free, right? And digital art and music, you know, Napster wasn't trying to disrupt the music industry, and yet through the sheer nature of its existence, it did, right? You know, and so what you have though is these market forces that swoop in, and ultimately what happened is culture across the board was simultaneously devalued, and then platforms emerged to monetize above the content creator, right? So you have this kind of attention economy, which is nested below the extraction economy, right? So YouTube, Spotify, Pandora are all monetizing musicians' work, and the artists aren't really being remunerated for that.
Right.
And so similar with digital art, which is a very kind of esoteric thing to begin with, you know, it's like, how would you sell this? But it has been collected through contracts, right? And provenance certificates. Like, how do you sell, if you're an artist and you made a net art website, like a website that's an art piece that requires that people go to the website to view it, how do you monetize that? How do you sell that, you know? Mm-hmm. Well, because the piece, it's like you can't just lock it away and not let anyone see it. The piece needs visitors in order to exist, in order for it to be completed. So that needs to be stipulated in the contract, and they figured it out. But what Benton and I started trying to do a few years ago was create single edition video artworks, like actually using blockchain technology and distributed storage as to theorize what would happen if artists did have full rights and control, like this ERTP thing, right? We were envisioning as like a browser plugin, right? But like if I was having an exhibition in New York with one video art piece that I'd made, it can't be seen in LA. It's single edition. It can only be shown in one place at a time. And so what that does is it introduces a type of artificial scarcity, but moreover, it redefines the ontology of the digital art, of a digital object, right? Because it's now been given individuated thingness, right? Okay. Through hashing and distributed storage and these two legal contracts which are pointing at those hashes, right? Let's see, I drew this out for somebody recently. I'm in the middle of finishing up a white paper, but basically like this is like the baseline. I don't know if you could see this, but like this is sort of the baseline system for how this would work. And basically the hashes for all the files are contained in all the places. So they're all pointing at each other basically, right? Mm-hmm. And then a token is issued, which is pointing at, you know, the point of reference in IPFS, which is pointed at the smart contract, which is pointed at the certificate of authenticity. And you use that token to redeem the artwork basically, right? Okay. So you can see it. I'm finishing up writing about this because basically there's the baseline level is defining what is this thing, right? How does this exist? And then there's, from that baseline level, you start building scaffolding of like, well, what can we do with this? Is it possible to completely reprogram the fundamental nature of what property ownership is and how it functions ecologically? And like, is it tied to communities? Is it like, can we completely reinvent this idea of currency and property ownership to like, for a completely new world, rather than reifying all these old ideas which don't really help anyone except rich people, you know? So that's like kind of the level I'm working on this right now, but I'm almost done sort of writing out the different parts as they currently stand in my system. And I'd like to share them with you guys so we can sort of look it over. Mm-hmm. And then like the rest of the white paper is sort of unpacking different scenarios. And I'm basically writing my master's thesis on this and trying to develop community models for this in Buffalo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's like the baseline level is how do we define a digital object? And then on top of that, how do we use it? Right. Because like the thing is like with CryptoKitties, you know, starting in the end of 2017, that's when crypto art, which when people think of blockchain art, that's what they're referring to is people that tokenized single pictures, like usually like small graphics of poorly drawn frogs or the kitties or whatever. Like they're basically like glorified trading cards that are tied to a token, right? That are then sold and speculated on a secondary market. And it got a lot of attention. And all of a sudden, the idea of digital asset creation and selling became viable for a lot of people, and a lot of our ideas became viable. But what's happened is you have the crypto art thing has kind of splintered off, and the people that are involved with it aren't really involved in the larger cultural community. It's kind of becoming its own little closed ecosystem with its own ideology and sense of aesthetics, which isn't really connected to the broader social and cultural context, which I think is incredibly problematic on a lot of levels. So on many, and also I think fundamentally they're misunderstanding the technologies and they're misunderstanding culture. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a complete mess. So I am not interested at all in engaging the current blockchain startup community as it currently stands. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do engage them, I talk with them, but like, I don't agree with them on a lot of levels. And I was a part of the first generation of blockchain art startups. And so like people like Ascribe.io, Monograph, there was a whole slew of people that were launching these art provenance websites. And there was a lot of them kind of went under, like when the crypto market tanked, a lot of people sort of went out. And so now there's kind of this new batch of people that are doing it. But, you know, like Super Rare is one of the companies I met with them, and they're basically doing like licensing for Major League Baseball. So Major League Baseball can sell online memorabilia. And that's cool, but like that's because MLB doesn't really understand what a digital asset is, and all they're doing is issuing ERC 721 tokens for basically baseball cards, you know. And then you have, you know, other people like the Rare Pepe wallet, which, you know, technically it made it possible to collect these digital art assets, but, you know, again, it's intensely problematic, and they're basically just speculating on the art. They've created these secondary markets that they're just constantly speculating on the art. Now, what could be very interesting about this is through the use of smart contracts, you can bake in resale royalties to the artists. So artists, digital artists, especially fine artists, you know, I sell you a work for $100 because I'm broke. I become famous and you sell that work for $1,000, and then the next guy $10,000, and I'm completely cut out from that wealth that I've created. Right. And I can't feed my kids, but these wealthy art collectors are making buckets of money. There needs to be a way of artists to participate in the secondary market. And so, especially when it comes to digital art, if everyone in the digital art community started selling their works through gallerists using a distributed object framework where resale royalties were built into the smart contract, it was a part of the piece. You literally can't copy the piece and sell it in another way, or you're breaking the contract, and that's not the actual piece. It constitutes a form of soft unionism, which is not, you can't really, the antitrust, it's not subject to antitrust lawsuits because there's no hierarchical organization that's organizing the artists. It's just being mediated through an autonomous smart contract system. Yeah.
Yeah, this is all very good, and you may have heard Jim and Gary bring up the blockchain platform RChain. I don't know how much familiarity you have with it. So it's still in development. So it's not we're not at our in production or mainnet just yet, but that's coming here in the next few months. But one of the applications, I'll talk about two, but the first one is called RSong. So the RSong application, which is built on top of the RChain platform, it's for musicians, and more specifically for the independent or indie musicians. So it helps to solve the issue of artists and musicians not being reimbursed for their work. So here's so with the model, a artist composes the song, and he has his friends act as musicians on the song, and they make a recording. And then when the song is put onto RSong and it's downloaded, when that customer purchases that song for, say, for $5, that $5 gets distributed to those who are involved in the creation of the song. So you have the artists, or the composer, the artist, and so forth. So, and it's all part of the metadata of the song. So it helps address, what's happening on Spotify, where artists aren't being reimbursed appropriately for their work.
Yeah.
So they've taken that engine of the engine of the R song, and they're created a new product called RCAT. And RCAT is more specifically for digital assets, and it's more for the storage and distribution with smart contracts of digital assets. And both of these are very much in the early stages. So there's still a lot of development that's going to be working for that. But for the RCAT, there's one company that's or a company or a museum, Arterial, in the UK. They're interested in adopting the RCAT in the art world for digital assets, and to do some of those things that you had talked about with smart contracts. So I have a general familiarity of what you're referring to with these next levels of what art is, just because through my exposure of those two applications of the R song for the audio music world, and then RCAT for the digital asset world. So and then that breeds lots of other topics that I kind of struggle to talk about, which is accreditation. So you have this. How do you know, someone creates a piece of art? How do you know that person created that art and they didn't get it from somebody else? Well, it's part of this community that artist has that can vouch for that artist, and they can, for a song, they can, through accreditation and through that artist's community, they can vouch that yes, that independent artist did compose that song, and these artists did contribute to playing the instruments on that song. So it creates this community effect of the community is now involved in this verification process of who's actually the authors of the art, both audio and for digital.
Interesting. So rather than using a provenance system like that is just baked into the blockchain that has a list of previous owners, you're using a community verification model instead of that, or is it in addition to a provenance?
So, for instance, for music, in order to get your song onto that onboarding process, you created a song and you want to get it onto the platform, there has to be some sort of verification process to authenticate the fact that you were the one who did the composition, and the individuals you list were the individuals who played the music. So they're trying to, it's not perfect by any means, but they're trying to solve this problem of authentication. That and it's just getting the art in the physical world, the credits and the metadata onto the digital world, and verifying that what you enter into the system is correct. So, for instance, they use the example of David Bowie's songs. I can't go and take a David Bowie song and put it onto our song because I didn't create. I'm not the author of the song. So that's a very popular song. Now, if we use something that's more obscure, that isn't widely known, and I take a song that's very obscure and I go and claim it as my own, I try to put it on the system. Well, because of my accreditation, people are going to question that, say, hey, we question that you're the author of that content. So then there would have to be some more research and investigation before that asset gets put onto the blockchain. So they're working through the mechanics of it, but it's just how do you move from our analog world, the physical world, into getting it onto the digital world?
Well, there's something in here which I think is really interesting, and I've been sort of playing with in my head, at least, is this idea of you can't, and I think you're getting at something really important here, which is that you can't separate culture from the communities that create it.
Bingo. Yeah, and that speaks to more broadly what ArtChain is. In ArtChain, it's not your traditional corporate or business style model. We're a co-op. So it's you, and the theme is radical transparency. So each week there's a whole host of Zoom sessions like what we're on now, where you can, as a co-op member, sit in and listen in on the inner workings of what's going on in the ArtChain world and the development and the governance of ArtChain. So just as a spectator, you have this access that normally people in the blockchain world don't have into a particular platform. So you get to witness firsthand of all of the organization, or perhaps even the chaos that goes into the creation of a blockchain platform. And so the platform itself is embracing this idea of community. So as a community, ArtChain community member, we have voting rights. So each year, we have items of business, which are items of business that helps govern the actions of the executive and what happens in the co-op. And it's the community who are voting on those items of business. So in a sense, as a member, you have a voting right to help in the governance and direction of this greater thing, which is the blockchain platform. So in that theme, it speaks to the R song and the RCAT of working towards building out these art communities that help to helps for sustainability through the authentication and also for the consuming of it. So it leads on to other things such as tokenizations, where artists or a collection of artists, they have tokenized their art in the sense that the tokens get distributed to their fans, and with the fans, with the tokens, they can get special access to see the artists. So but it's all in that element of community. So which I think is good.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we've been talking about trying this out, like doing an experiential label for like experimental media performance. Mm-hmm. So it's like you actually have a tokenized asset that you enable to create sort of different types of interactions between artists and fans, between like both digital and physical experiences, right? Because if you create an album that's audiovisual, it's meant to be seen live, you can incentivize all sorts of different types of behaviors. But I mean, backtracking a little bit from there, I mean, it's like this idea of thinking about culture in and of itself as a platform cooperative, rather than a business, which I think is really interesting here, right? Creating alternative market scenarios or non-market scenarios, right? That are cooperative, right? So rather than just using this to reify the old systems, can we completely shift how we think about this, and how we construct value and who benefits and how and why? That's the opportunity here, because ultimately, if I'm just going to start a record label and do things the way that they've been done, it's like, well, we already have systems for that. Like, in art, I could sell my video art through a gallerist right now. It's not perfect, but it is very much possible for this to exist, so rather than trying to put, radio on TV or TV on the internet, what does this thing want to be in and of itself?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I'm putting in the chat some information on the weekly meetings for our song. So it's it's a Zoom session just like we're doing now. It's called Blockchain Music Tech. So and there's the Zoom link.
Is it on the Archain calendar?
It is on the, yeah, here. So let me get the Archain calendar in here. So it's every Friday at, so you're in the Eastern time zone. So every Friday at 11:30 a.m.
Is it in the, so if I'm in the general chat window and I'm going to the Google thing here that Jim posted. I'm looking at the calendar.
So yeah, that link that and I'm not sure what
yeah, here I see it. I see Blockchain Music Tech, and I see this
right
on the calendar. Cool.
Yeah, that's the one. So and when you click on it, it comes up with the date and time and in the Zoom channel. So so that's a weekly get together where it's sometimes it's more structured in nature. We're talking about our song, but a lot of times it kind of drifts off into talking about the music industry as a whole and off-topic things.
Do you have any musicians in that group, like people that are active touring musicians?
Yes, actually. So Nora Germain she's a violinist. So she is. Let me pull her up here in LinkedIn. So she's a regular with the group, and so she has a lot to say about the topic. And others. Let me get Nora. Here we go. And then we have two other people who are. So that's linked to Nora Germain, musician and writer. And
Greg Meredith is a musician, Steve.
True. Yep. Greg's a musician. And let's see. What is oh boy. Sultani. What's Sultani's first name?
Fabian.
Fabian. That's it. So let me put in Fabian in here. So with our song, Fabian Sultani, he's been in the music industry for quite some time, and he's the product manager for our song. And then Daryl Newdorf, he's a music producer as well. So but the R song. So out of that came the RCAT. And RCAT is a little bit more harder to find information on. But I think that would be more in the lines of the efforts that you're working with.
Yeah, it sounds very, it sounds there's a lot of overlap there. I'd like to know more about what their model is.
Yeah. So, and if you visit us on Friday and speak with the group, you can get better insight into some of these things that I've talked about as far as community and authentication and culture. They can speak to it better than I can because they're the ones that are helping to drive it. Now, granted, they're kind of coming from the music industry side, but I think there's a lot of carryover into other digital art assets as well. So, yeah.
Oh, this is funny. What are you doing, Gary?
I'm showing you. Wait a minute. Am I on mute? Hold on. Just.
No, yeah, I hear you.
Okay. What I'm showing you is some digital art. I didn't create this. I copied it out of I copied the code out of a tutorial on this site called code.world. And here's the code to produce that. Is that not amazing?
That is pretty neat.
Yeah. But what I was showing you when we started was my McRobot avatar that I created last night with this software. It is amazing. Tell me if do you ever play with anything like this?
There is a language that lots of artists, digital artists use, which is called processing.
Yeah.
Processing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a variant of JavaScript that lets you has some high level functions for doing digital drawing and animation algorithmically.
Yeah.
So that's like what we teach at the university level to design, like undergraduate design students.
Sure.
So it seems very similar to what you're showing me here, where it's like
this language. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it is a light version of something called Haskell.
Oh wow, Haskell, isn't that like pretty old?
Not so old, but it's very powerful. I want to show you some of the commands available if I can figure out how to do it. So is this too small to see? But here are built-in functions.
Oh wow!
And their types. This thing is so easy to use. This is the place to go to learn Haskell. I kid you not. Okay. Anyway, I'll stop now.
That's cool.
Yeah, I thought it was appropriate to our. So, whoops, there's my. Okay, now I gotta stop sharing. Open and share.
That's cool.
Yeah, code.world. Check it out.
All right. Yeah,
but I think I've heard of processing. I think we run that on Arduinos, don't we?
Yeah, it's like a variation. Yeah, they use Arduino is actually technically it's its own language, but the clients are very similar and the coding environments are very similar.
Oh, so you're into what do they call it? Internet of Things as well, huh?
You know, I'm aware of it. I don't really work with it myself.
Yeah, I played around with Arduinos and those kind of boards and things and little automated robots.
Like we would use them for like interactive installations, you know. So like physical sensors, things.
They'd be perfect for that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, this is what we're talking about right now is actually what my primary interest right now is in talking to guys like you. That's like this is what my art is right now, you know.
And I think through us, we can introduce you to others who are thinking along the lines of what you're thinking, and can help you carry on the conversations in the directions that you want to go. So, my exposure to all this has been fairly recent and fairly new, but I think there's certainly a wealth of knowledge and information that as you continue to join the Zoom sessions through Colab and through our chain, you'll certainly get a lot more of these types of discussions and so forth.
Yeah, and so far, I mean, everyone I meet is like so amazing and interesting, and so it's been really generative for me to just start to meet everyone. I mean, I don't know, when I was talking to Jim about sort of entering into this whole space, we're like, okay, we're going to start a channel, like an art blockchain channel. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we can do that. But I want to just kind of get to know everyone a little bit, and see what everyone else is doing and seeing what the conversation is and how I can sort of contribute to the conversation that's already happening around platform cooperatives and liquid democracy. And, these are things that I think are all connected. Before we even start talking about, digital property, it's like there's already so much there, and it's all very interesting to me. And I'd really like to figure out, I think, how to model some of these tools in real life. So one of the things my sort of, I don't want to call it my pet project, but my interest right now is in fleshing out like what we're talking about, like this distributed object framework I developed, but I never really spent the time really writing a thorough thing out about what it is and what the implications are. So that's becoming this pretty extensive document. But that has formulated the foundation for I made some blockchain sculptures that use the distributed object framework as the underlying assumption for thinking about new forms of art. Number one. Number two is what I'm really interested in is how we can use some of these tools that you guys are developing right now. I mean, I've known about liquid democracy for a while through democracy.earth and things like that. But how do we help groups of people collaborate and wield power together that don't necessarily have the organizational tools or the time or the administrative overhead to make these things happen? So case in point, let's say we had musicians, right, that are playing, they're independent musicians. They don't really make any money, right? And long story short, how do we get, like, let's say there's 50 to 100 people in a scene in your city, right? How do you get those people to share the cost burden of the spaces that they use to perform in and eventually build up enough capital so they can take that space off of the market, right? And stop being subject to rent increases over time?
Have you met Michael Linton from Dig Life yet?
I did meet Michael, and I'm very fascinated with his work. I'm just starting to dig in a little bit to some of his stuff, but I'm very, very, very interested in his perspectives on things.
His ideas are really amazing, and I've been listening to him. I mean, and they don't come easy, because I've been listening to him for 2 years, and it's just now really started to make deep sense to me what he's talking about.
Really?
Yes.
Huh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as we started talking, like, it was fairly immediate. Like, we're like, okay, we're on the same page with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I also, you have to understand, like, I come in the art world, like, all we're talking about is like platform cooperatives now. And it's like a big topic of conversation. Like, I have a friend that's starting a real estate investment cooperative for artists in New York, but she's not using digital tools to do it. And so basically, I want to see if I can start a music space in Buffalo, where the real estate's pretty cheap up here, but that can be co-managed by 25 to 50 people as like a DAO, basically. And that is collectivized and then basically buys itself. I want the DAO to eventually buy itself as it earns money over a 5-year period.
Okay.
Using a circular economic model, like what Michael's talking about, basically.
Yeah. Great.
So that's like, I don't know, that's like kind of, but I'm still like writing this stuff all out, and like figuring out what's possible, what isn't possible. So yeah, those are basically my 2 areas of focus right now.
Well, neat. And Jim, do we plan on having a blockchain art on the calendar? Will this be a weekly session, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yep, I created a channel and I put this meeting on the calendar. And
okay.
I'm hoping that we get to the point very soon where we start writing art contracts in Macrolang in the channel.
Okay. Okay.
But we're not that far away. But I mean, there's a lot that has to be done. But so many of these problems I see people starting to imagine now, or these ways of dealing with things. The tech is almost there.
Yeah, and that was a big thing. Like 3 years ago, when we were starting to talk about this stuff, I mean, IPF, it was also alpha that it wasn't usable. Like, we were basically we were theorizing about something that didn't really exist yet, and it still kind of is clunky. I mean, and that's using Ethereum. Like, never mind whatever this is. This is like on a completely other level than that.
And there's so many people working on this right now. You just don't know where the answers are going to come from. And I'm seeing that, I thought our chain was going to solve everything, but now I'm seeing there are other people that are coming up with parts of this puzzle, and we need to stay abreast of all these amazing developments. Keybase.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't even started digging into them yet, but I've been hearing about them through Jim a bit. It sounds very exciting and promising.
Well, neat. So, yeah, so I guess we'll come back each week and so this was a good introduction for everyone on the call and for everyone who is going to be watching the video on replay. Any thoughts on next week when we come back? What would be a topic, or I see maybe this all kind of builds on itself as it's an effort that's kind of moving forward, and it's the community organizing. That's we're using these tools which help communities organize and create structure. So we're leveraging those, and Zoom is one of those tools that we're using to get acquainted with each other, get to know everyone's interests, get sort of on the same page, and then it's move on to the next step, and from there the next step after that. So I'd be interested, as you Eric, as you work through your ideas and the object capabilities, and you kind of put it together, just see what that work is, and that'll help us to maybe get on the same page.
So let me ask you guys a question. So like what I'm thinking, there's two thoughts I have. One is I sort of pull out just sort of the very basic outline format for my idea of what a distributed object is and share that with you guys. In a separate state, like Jim wants me to create a state document for this channel. And then we can sort of start hashing that out there. Or I can send you guys links to the larger document that I'm working on, where I'm actually describing what the function of the certificate of authenticity is, how that works, what needs to happen in the smart contract, and actually really starting to sort of flesh these things out. What would be better? Just a short, a 1 to 2 page little thingy, or a longer thing that's in process that I'm working with?
Well, my thought would be maybe the shorter version at this point, and so as we get more acclimated to the topic. And then I think, then the week after that, then we could, so next week we could talk about the shorter version and kind of run through that, get that familiarity, and then follow it up the following week. So this is, so next week and the week after that, maybe do the long version, and then we can have that to kind of digest. So we kind of, self-education, and you're the teacher, getting us up to speed and working us through this. So
also, I'm going to try and bring someone into this conversation named Lauren Van Hoftenschick, and she is an expert in art contracts. She's doing her dissertation on this right now, and she's a friend of mine. And so I'd like to invite her to next week's meeting, if that's cool.
Sure, absolutely.
Also, just on general principle, it seems like it's a lot of men represented in this group. And so having some women involved in the conversation and some people that are actually impacted in the communities by the technologies that we're developing, I think would be a really interesting sort of addition to this conversation,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, and let me add one thing. As an exercise, if you get any free time, create yourself a Keybase account and join a new channel that I'm going to call Rolling.Digital Art or something along those lines. But I'll put an invitation in the Rolling channel, which I hope to see you in soon. And Lauren is a member of that channel already. So, I'm pushing Keybase because I see Keybase as being closer to a platform to start building from than anything we've looked at so far.
Is this the Rolling.js channel?
No, this is something new, and this is sort of like Discord and Mattermost, which you're familiar with, but is different and better, and takes care of identity and cryptography much better than the current platforms we're on.
Oh wait, so Keybase has its own social component?
Yes.
Oh, so you want me to join Keybase and then fine. Well, I'll join Keybase, and then what's the best way of contacting you guys? Are you guys on the Discord?
Yes.
In any of the Discord channels, any one of us will see a message to us if you just type our name in with the message, and it will pop up on our screens immediately.
Okay, because yeah, I may ask you for help setting this up later, or accessing the channel through Keybase.
Sure. Anytime, actually. Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Cool. Well, I'm so excited to meet you guys. This is really cool. Thanks for listening to me yak about art.
Fascinating. Thank you.
I hope that it wasn't too confusing, because I kind of jumped around all over the place.
It was a very good introduction to it all. Thank you.
I mean, it's helpful that you guys like already know. I mean, one of the things that I'm personally working on is trying to articulate these ideas to people that don't know anything about the blockchain, which, I mean, my graduate program is actually a perfect place for that, because these are folks that are really coming from more of a fine art, painting, sculpture background. And, you know, I'm trying to figure out how to not talk for half an hour to explain what I'm interested in, right? Or what's going on, you know?
Mm-hmm. And what might be helpful is, since blockchain in itself is this new world and people are, you know, kind of intimidated by it, perhaps in your explanation, you don't even mention the word blockchain. You just kind of talk about this functionality, talk about what it can do, and leave the blockchain and the tech, you know, that's working behind the scenes, and you don't even really bring it up.
That's an excellent idea. We're getting to the point now where we can just talk about the new tech.
Exactly.
Because the blockchain can be, I mean, we can hide that from people. They don't have to see that anymore, I don't think.
Well, but there is something though. It's a really interesting question, right? Because when we start hiding the tech, that also obfuscates the conversation about the tech, and then it only becomes technical people that can have that conversation, right? And part of my interest is in bringing people that are in communities impacted by the tech into that conversation. And in order for them that to happen, they need to understand a little bit about the tech, you know?
But that was the point I was making. Just like this site, code.world, I was telling you about. I mean, Haskell is one of the ugliest languages you've ever looked at if you've tried to learn it. But this code.world makes it painless, because you don't see any, I mean, you don't have to see any of the ugly stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying about the blockchain. It's there. If you need to look at it, it's there. And there are gentle ways to be introduced to that. But, you know, for now, I don't think people, I may use that in my own spiel about this thing and just say, no, the tech, we can handle that with the tech, you know, and not bring blockchain into it, because, you know, blockchain is a ordeal to finally understand how it works, you know.
So we need higher level metaphors to talk about the behavioral aspects of this. And that in and of itself,
that's much better than
it's an important conversation. That's actually something else that I'm thinking a bit about right now, is what are the metaphors that we're using for things like interface design, and how can those be abstracted into something that people feel like they have agency over?
All of this is, once you work through those aspects of how to communicate it, this is a TED Talk in creation. I mean, this is, I could see you on a stage in front of an audience discussing this.
Oh, nice. 7 o'clock show is different than the 10 o'clock show. Let me tell you that. Cool, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming this week. I will definitely try and be on the call on Friday, and then Saturday. I'd love to. Who is this person that I'm supposed to meet on Saturday?
Dan Conley.
Dan Conley, and let me just quickly look at the calendar again.
And I have to add, Dan's calls are sort of not real regular anymore, but
it's the 10 a.m. R-Chain Community Building office hours?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'll definitely try and do that on Saturday.
Yeah, and what we do is just kind of check in the channels to see if Dan is gonna hold his class, and if he is, we join, and if not, then we go do something else.
What channel would he tell this on?
Rolang.js usually, I think, is where he announces it.
He talks in various channels. I think this week he announced it in 5 different channels, including general.
But what we might do, since the topic of discussion is pretty loose, and Dan is very open for ideas on what to talk about, perhaps since it's early in the week, we can say, "Hey, Dan, we've started up a topic of blockchain art, and we understand that you have an expertise in electronic rights transfer protocol. Perhaps you could speak to that topic on Saturday." So perhaps we can kind of set the agenda for Saturday and see how open he is to that. I know he's got other things he's been working on that he likes to kind of showcase, but perhaps we can influence that a bit.
That would be wonderful. Would you mind getting in touch with him to see?
Yeah, actually, when we get off the call here, I'll send a message through Discord to Dan, and I'll copy the three of you on it, so you'll be alerted, and so we'll kind of open up that dialogue to see if we can kind of set that pace agenda for Saturday.
You can mention even the art channel.
Oh, that's perfect. So what I'll do, even better, Jim, that was a good one. So in the art channel, that's where I'll start, in the blockchain art channel. So I'll make a note there directing it at DC Casey, which is Dan's Conley's handle. And I'll include the 3 of you in that message to start. So that's where this conversation will live. So Dan will reply, and then we'll have some questions for him, and then we'll kind of have this discussion back and forth. So that's the beauty of Eric, when you talk about meeting people and engagement and getting to know us, Discord is, we call it our asynchronous tool for communication. So we're all getting to know each other asynchronously through Discord. So that's the beauty. You can send a message now, and then a couple hours later, you'll get a reply back, and then you can reply at your convenience. So it's all on your schedule.
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm looking forward to getting involved there. I just I didn't want to start just posting stuff, introducing myself in the channels without sort of meeting people face to face and then figuring, what I mean? It just didn't feel right to do that.
Well, now you're officially welcomed into the community, and by all means, you have free liberty and free reign to contact and engage anyone and everyone in the community and starting the discussion. And I mean, that's actually what we enjoy, is that engagement and just information coming through. And your interests are a nice diversion or separation from what we're traditionally talking about. So, art is for the people and for the culture. So it's going to be a nice, it's going to be a refreshing topic to engage in, as opposed to being down into the code. So we're looking forward to exploring, all the avenues that it'll bring.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about art is, again, getting back to this whole it's not just about painting or whatever. It's it's an interesting place to prototype some of these design ideas, right? You can try things out. You can prototype concepts for how the macro structure works in art without there being a necessity for it to be a perfect concept or for it to work. It can be more of like a prototype, basically,
Sure. And for blockchain, this technology that's just now come onto the scene, it's relatively new. Being able to work through the mechanics in an industry where it's not mission critical, so art and culture, that's it's great. And that was the great why everyone liked our song, because if if someone goes to our song and they try to download the song and something happens, it breaks, it's not earth shattering. No one's going to wind up in the hospital because their song didn't download. So this is a good platform, to work through all the failures and the challenges. But so it'll help us kind of get our game together and then move on to those industries and topics that have higher stakes in the game, or they're more mission critical in life. So there's an alignment there with what you're working on in culture and art, and this broader blockchain platform. It's just the beginning, and we need something that's we're going to be allowed and permitted to fail, and it's not going to cause us a great problems.
Like, here's the thing: if we can develop a platform cooperative for artists to co-manage and collectively own and share, like a music performance venue, let's say, right? Who's to say that model then couldn't be then adapted for other low-income communities to help, like, buy their way into the real estate market and participate in ways that were previously really impossible for them to do so, right? Like, that's kind of where I'm thinking about this, right?
Exactly. So it's, once the model kind of gets set up, then it's, hey, what else can we do with this? This is, we can sort of extrapolate it and move it on to other things as well. Greater ambitions. And with that, I think there's one other person I just thought of that you would enjoy speaking with, and Rick Jensen. He's a part of our Colab and Art Chain community, but he was the president of the record label Sub Pop in Seattle, Washington, and back in the 90s when grunge music was emerging. So he's been a active member in the Art Chain community, especially on the governance side, but he can speak to the world of art and culture and communities and civilization at a tremendous level. So I'm sure you'd have a lot of engaging conversations with Rick Jensen as well.
Oh, that sounds fabulous. Yeah, really into it.
Yeah.
And he'll be a part of the meeting on Friday, I'm assuming?
He hasn't been at the meeting in quite some time. He was early on. And it's now, the past couple of weeks, it's been hit or miss. But through Discord, and when I'll include him in my message to Dan Conley. So I'll bring him into the conversation. He may appreciate that. So I think initially we'll engage with Rick through Discord. That'll be the introduction, and then eventually you'll catch up with him on a Zoom session at some point in time.
That's Rich, right?
Rick, what I've been saying, Rick. I knew Rich Jensen. Sorry, Rich, if you're watching this later on for messing up, but
I keep calling him Steve, so
there's a lot of forgiveness around here.
So, all right. So basically, in terms of what I need to do, I need to give you guys a 2-page distributed object sort of Scratch document for next week, and then in 2 weeks, longer version. I'm also wondering if I have like a PowerPoint that I've developed, like talking about, well, it's mostly trying to explain to non-technical people what the blockchain is. But I'm wondering if I should sort of formulate like a 20-minute presentation about art and blockchain, just to sort of maybe record it and be able to give to people. Because like, it seems like everyone else has, Jim has one, and what's his name? The guy, Jim, who's the guy I met in Brooklyn?
Johnny Dabrowski.
Oh, Johnny. I met Johnny. Yeah, and I started thinking something with Jay.
Joaquin.
Yeah, Joaquin. Yeah, Joaquin. yeah, like everyone has these presentations for the different ideas, and it may be a wise idea to sort of develop something that can be recorded just for. Would that be helpful rather than me giving this sort of very nonlinear?
Yeah, I think so. That's because it's even though it's the four of us on the call, these videos get watched later on, and there's that audience is at different levels. So certainly I would benefit from it, but I think the people who watch this on replay would benefit from it as well.
Yeah, we can start off with your presentation next week.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a lot for me to do this week.
Well, I tell you what, the idea is to, if this is going to be a continuation, I think what we might do is, we need to take this in smaller bites. So I think that first bite is just that one-page document with those bullet points. So if you have that,
I have all of that stuff. I have a bunch of material. I just need to organize it, really.
Yeah, I think just with that is enough to generate the discussion. And I think maybe then the week after that, then have your slide presentation, and then let's move the more detailed information out another week, because that'll allow us a couple of weeks to kind of build up to the detailed document. So, I think all of this, we want to, keep it low stress and keep it fun. And we certainly don't want, anyone to feel burdened in any way with commitments. So, I think to keeping it simple because we're still getting on
totally.
Speed.
But also right now, like this is also what I'm working on. Like this is literally like what I'm doing. So
okay.
So it's not like I'm working on 100 other projects. Like I'm really basically focusing exclusively on this stuff, at least for the next year while I can.
Sure.
So I have time to do this. I just need to sit down. I just moved. So I'm just like getting set up. And now that I'm like, today's like my first day of actually like, all right, I'm sitting down and focusing, getting stuff done. So this is good. It gives me a little bit of a timeline to sort of think about like the conversation and how we can evolve it over the next month.
Sure. So
this is great. I think we should probably stop here. Now, Jim, is there another, is the Digital Life call soon? Is that 4:00 or did we already pass that?
Yeah.
Jim, you're off. You're muted. Jim, you're muted.
You're muted.
Yeah, there was one at noon, New York time, which I was late for and missed the first half hour. And when I got there, it was over. So
Oh,
I was, but
I think on the calendar there's something at 4:00.
Yeah, that's on the Dig Light calendar, the one at 12. At 4:00 we have work study, which is I think it was slated to be on the governance contracts, the voting, liquid democracy stuff. It's also possible we may work on some of the key-based bot stuff.
okay.
On these work studies, it depends who shows up, what we work on. What they're interested in.
All right. Well, I'll try to hit that. I have to go run some errands right now, but let's. I'm really excited to meet you guys, and let's stay in touch over the next week, and I'll try and hit some of these other Zoom meetings.
Very good.
Jim, can you send me a link to the Digital Life calendar? Because I'm looking at the R Chain calendar, but I didn't realize Digital Life is a separate thing.
Yeah, it's the if we just And there's the link. I guess I can send it to you on Discord too.
There we go. Okay, brilliant. Good. All right, this is what I wanted to see.
And
cool, man.
I don't know that you actually. I know you joined Dig Life. I don't know that you joined our chain. I mean, you don't have to do that right away, but at some point, would probably be good to join our chain as well. I do expect that we'll be writing contracts.
I'm in the Art Chain Discord. I'm in the pub Art Chain Discord.
Oh, you are in there. Did you go through your KYC?
I think first you go to the archain.coop website and you purchase your membership. It's like $20. And then let's see here, join co-op. So
maybe I didn't join it. I don't know how I found my way into the Discord without joining.
Yeah. So first stop, I think, is the archain.coop website. And that's where and it's been a while since I've done it. So you click on join the co-op.
Well, you can, the reason you can get on there is there is a room for people to join, and you can see a few of the channels on the Archain Discord. But until you purchase the membership, there are a lot of rooms that are channels that are reserved for members only.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll get on Archain today. So there's too many things. It was too many things at once. I'm on Holochains Matter Most. I'm on DigiLife's Matter Most. I'm on the Colab Discord. I'm on the Archain Discord.
And hopefully on Keybase soon.
Oh yeah. I just, a lot of stuff. And then I got like my Google Docs. I've got like seriously like 20 tabs open on Chrome with like Google Docs that people are updating with stuff. And I'm like, just like, wow.
Yep, it's blowing up.
Yeah, it's a little much to process. So I'm just bear with me.
Oh, sure. Hey, we can appreciate that information overload.
Cool, guys. So I do need to split, but thanks so much. And I'll talk to you all on the Discord.
Sounds good. Pleasure